Something that I learned when consuming media is that you should always expect a sudden shift in the story's direction in any series, but this mostly plays out in series that look wholesome and look very innocent, only for them to drastically change directions and show us or reveal something dark or bizarre as the story continues, and manga is no exception. And quite recently I stumbled upon a manga series that at first I think nothing of it, and I thought it was going to be just this wholesome romance story between a boy and a girl, but quickly started to shift into a different direction that I didn't expect. And the next thing you know, as every chapter continues, it starts to get more weirder and more bizarre, and it makes you scratch your head wondering what the heck is going on and why did the story shift in this particular way. The manga series in question that I'm talking about is called Mitsuishi-san is Being Weird This Year, and I kid you not, the only way I found out of this manga series existence is through a meme post that I found online, and curiosity got the best of me and I decided to check out the manga series for myself. And let me tell you, the first couple of chapters start fine and there's nothing wrong with the manga series at all, as we get introduced to our main characters of this story, Hajime Ichinose and Yuka Mitsuishi, and in the first couple of chapters start all very well as we get to see these very wholesome interactions between them, and we see that really there's something more going on between than just simply two people who go to the same school, especially with Mitsuishi, as the way she acts and behaves toward Hajime, it's very clear that she has special feelings for him. And these couple of chapters show us just very wholesome stuff, like Mitsuishi letting Hajime borrow her gym clothes when he forgot his, or having a conversation between each other when they both encounter one another in a convenience store. And if we're going into the romantic aspect, there's also a chapter in which Mitsuishi is perfectly fine with Hajime braiding her hair and later on teasing him to make him tell her that she is cute, something which he does tell her. So once again, these first couple of chapters are perfectly fine and you don't see anything wrong with where the story is going at, as you think that this is just going to be a wholesome manga of two people being able to enjoy their time with each other and having great moments and being able to create great memories with one another. That is until you are in chapter 10, and after that chapter things start to become a little more strange with this story, as in chapter 10 we still start perfectly fine in the story as we see Mitsuishi spending her time with Hajime, using any chance she got in order to just simply be next to him and become more closer. But as she is looking through his bag, she notices his keys to his apartment, and out of nowhere Mitsuishi decides to put his keys on her mouth, making Hajime think that she swallowed his keys, in which even when the teacher is told about this, even he is confused as to why this even happened. Now it will be later revealed in the chapter that Mitsuishi didn't swallow his keys, since when he's no longer around she quickly spits out the keys from her mouth, which once again just still weirds out the teacher, but he doesn't try to go any further as to why she did any of this. And after this you kind of are left confused as to what was that chapter. But strangely, the next chapter after this, while Hajime does briefly mention the key situation that happened, he doesn't really seem to be that bothered by it and just continues on with his life, even still talking and spending time with Mitsuishi after that whole situation. And even after all this, we still get romantic moments between them, and even get a moment in which Mitsuishi is jealous when girls start paying attention to Hajime, making her be determined to keep him all to herself and make sure that only he has eyes for her. But once again, this is where the series starts to become weird once again, as when Hajime gets sick and is sent to an infirmary with Mitsuishi taking care of him, she decides to come up with an idea in which she involves her sister, in which her sister would be the one to take Hajime out of school and then bring him back to his house. But when Hajime wakes up and finds out that he's in his house and finds out that both Mitsuishi and her sister are with him, at first he is confused, but once again, just like with the key situation, he quickly brushes it off and isn't too concerned about the fact that not only is Mitsuishi in his house, but that she also got her sister to take him out of school. But once again, the next chapter, everything seems to be fine and completely normal. The only sudden change is, of course, seeing Mitsuishi start to become much more clingy and much more obvious with her affection towards Hajime. And it's also here that we will come to find out that Mitsuishi isn't the only weird person in this story, as Hajime, despite him not doing anything or acting bizarre unlike Mitsuishi, it will only take one chapter to completely erase erase all that because Hajime, just like Mitsuishi, is also a weirdo as well. We get this chapter in which Mitsuishi is trying to tie a knot with a cherry stem. When Mitsuishi is showing Hajime that she managed to make a knot with her tongue, Hajime decides to pull her tongue and Mitsuishi proceeds to bite his finger. And while all this is already weird, it becomes even more weirder and more baffling to witness when we see that because of the bite that she did to Hajime's finger, it starts to bleed. And while she is panicking and wanting to stop the bleeding, Hajime proceeds to lick the blood off his finger right in front of her. And despite Mitsuishi being weird herself, even this kind of freaked her out, as she didn't expect Hajime to do this when she was still looking. But once again, the weirdness doesn't stop, as the next chapter, when Hajime is trying to hide from a teacher, Mitsuishi insists on Hajime hiding underneath her skirt. And they don't do this once, they do this twice. And that's the chapter. And just when you think that this is going to be the pattern that we're going to see from now on, that we're just going to get even more weirder chapters as the story continues, the author decides to make a completely normal chapter of just them two spending time together cleaning the pool. Is the dialogue a bit weird? Yes, but it's nothing compared to the past few chapters that we have seen so far. But I guess for whatever reason, the author was trying to make it very clear that it's not just Mitsuishi and Hajime that are the weirdos in this world, because we would then get a chapter in which Hajime's mom is not only encouraging Mitsuishi to do whatever she wants with Hajime, but also makes it very clear to her that she has to keep him all to herself. Otherwise, there's going to be other girls that will take Hajime from her, which is the last thing that Mitsuishi wants to let happen. So the next time Mitsuishi sees Hajime once again, after having another strange conversation with him, she proceeds to give him a hickey, in which while he does react to it and was not expecting it, he, like usual, just lets it slide. And when he comes home and his mother sees this, she's just happy because not only does she know who did it, but for her, she was just glad to see that Mitsuishi took her advice. And it's in these parts of the story that really I just had to wonder, why did the author take this story in this kind of direction? Because we went from a story that had romance aspects between two people, in which it's obviously the will they won't they kind of story, in which you want to see these people be together because it's so obvious that there was more to come between Hajime and Mitsuishi. But now it's just simply a contest in which we get to see who is much more weirder and insane. Is it Mitsuishi or is it Hajime? Because every chapter, if there is no weird action that's happening between them, what we instead get is a conversation between Mitsuishi and Hajime that you wouldn't even think a normal person would ever have, especially with the person that you have feelings for. But I guess with these two, since they're both weird in their own ways, I guess they do have that chemistry that only they could have. And it's at this point that I've come to realize that there's not really any point in focusing on the plot any longer, because the plot has already been lost ages ago. At this point, this has just become a manga series that you can easily quickly turn off your brain and you're not going to miss much. I mean, this just went from romance to just seeing two people just get stranger and stranger as the story continues. And just when you think that you've seen it all and there's no way that this story can get more weirder and more out of this world, you are proven wrong and you are left at a loss of words. We get a chapter in which it involves Hajime and one of his friends that are heading back to his house. But when Hajime opens his room, we once again see Mitsuishi's older sister, and we see that she managed to get into his house through an open window, and already that's insane enough. But we then get this moment in which Mitsuishi's older sister challenges both Hajime and his friend that if they manage to beat her in a video game, then she will let them touch her boobs. Yes, this is a chapter that exists. Yes, this was what the chapter was all about, and unsurprisingly, Hajime and his friend managed to not win, and this will lead to Mitsuishi's older sister making them cause stress for losing so much. Because why not? Because I guess this is what this chapter needed. We needed to just make it even more bizarre than what it already was. And just when you think that it can't get more baffling, it manages to go take it a step further, because then we get a chapter in which Hajime is talking to this girl named Fuyuno, and all of a sudden he starts talking about how he likes her boobs and how big they are, and you would think the other girl Fuyuno would be creeped out or would try to, like, I don't know, smack him for saying that kind of comment out of nowhere. She is not fazed by it whatsoever and still continues talking to him as if he's not saying the most outlandish stuff. And things just become worse when Mitsuishi gets involved, and she of course gets jealous, and then all of a sudden this becomes like a standoff between Fuyuno and Mitsuishi trying to get Hajime all to themselves, only for it to fail as Hajime decides to bail on both of them just so he can hang out with his other friends. It's just, at this point, you just come to accept the fact that this is the story and there's no signs of ever changing, and this is just how it's going to be playing out until the very end. So when you get a chapter of Hajime fixated on Mitsuishi's hair, or him having a conversation with a blob doll while he's waiting for Mitsuishi to go to the festival, at this point even you yourself are not even fazed by it because something strange is bound to happen. Having normal chapters has been thrown out the window, so these kinds of moments are to be expected. Although I will say the last time I think I was truly baffled was when there was this chapter of Mitsuishi and Hajime both in the same room together. Hajime notices that Mitsuishi is putting his baby teeth in her mouth. So yeah, even though I was not supposed to be shocked by that, that still really shocked me, because what kind of person thinks of these kinds of things, and who would ever think of putting this in a chapter? I think overall what I think of this series is that even with context in many of these moments, this is still by far, as of right now, one of the strangest manga series I have read. I mean, it's labeled as a rom-com slice of life series, but those aspects only existed in the first couple of chapters, and ever since those early chapters this has become just something else. And it makes me now wonder, at the end of the day, what is the author's thinking process when it comes to writing stuff like this? Does it just pop in his head out of nowhere and he just goes with it, or does he actually take time and think about all this and says to themselves, how can I make this story much more weirder than it already is? I really don't know, and it could go both ways. But if there's one thing I learned from reading this series, is that mangas are truly a unique kind of entertainment, because I feel like when it comes to mangas, you can have any kind of story. You can have a emotional story, you can have a story with a ton of action, you can have stories that try to be realistic, and then you have stories like this that are just their own separate thing. And I feel like overall, if you want to turn off your brain and you want to be catched off guard with what you're looking at, and you like bizarre storytelling, then this manga is for you. But I feel like somewhere down the line I'm going to find an even more weirder series, and it's going to make this series look like your average rom-com. But with that, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.